It's a pleasure to see you all here on this lovely Upper Valley day. My name is Bill Wolforth. I'm a professor in the Department of Government here at Dartmouth, and there's plenty of seats up here. No one will ask you questions. There'll be no pressure if you come up close to the front. If you have to leave early, we'll understand. And it's my great pleasure to welcome to Dartmouth and introduce today's speaker, who is Stephen Kotkin, who's a professor of history and international affairs at Princeton University, a holder of many distinguished and important posts at that institution, and a scholar who in many ways is perfectly positioned to talk to you about today's subject, which is trying to understand authoritarian regimes, which may seem to be teetering on the edge, but seem to last forever, and may seem to be like the Rock of Gibraltar and always to be with us only to collapse immediately. How could, and with what scholarly background and credentials does Professor Kotkin arrive at this subject? Well, were I to talk about them in any depth, it would take far too much time away from his remarks. But just let's mention a few things. He has studied from the inside out in a groundbreaking monograph, The Dynamics of Stalinism from the Inside. He studied the collapse of the Eastern European Soviet regimes in 1989, which nobody expected. He studied things, he studied and written authoritatively on contemporary politics in such non-perfectly democratic countries as Putin's Russia. He has addressed it from a contemporary perspective, from a ground-up perspective, from a top-down perspective, from a global perspective, and from a deep historical and contemporary perspective. Few scholars can manage that task as Stephen Kotkin has. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Dartmouth, and look forward to your comments, Steve Kotkin.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for the invitation. This is my first time up here, so a nice opportunity. I've known Professor Wolforth for a long time. We were Princeton colleagues together in the early days, and he's known as the one who got away. He slipped through our grasp, and now you're the beneficiaries. But I have to say, we miss him. I'm going to give a very simple presentation because it's now 4:30, and you've probably been dealing all day with complex ideas, and you've probably had more than a day's worth of complex ideas, and so now it's going to be time to simplify a little bit. I'm going to introduce a couple of extremely simple propositions, illustrate them a little bit, and then if you're still here, we'll have question and answer. My first simple proposition is that authoritarian regimes are simultaneously very powerful and brittle. That this is an inherent characteristic of authoritarian regimes. They're not powerful for a while, and then they get brittle later. They're brittle all the way through. They suffer structural problems that even when they're strong, give them these inherent weaknesses. And therefore, they can collapse at any moment, or not collapse. We'll get into that in a second. My second proposition is that when authoritarian regimes collapse, they're replaced by authoritarian regimes, some other version of themselves, because the stuff that makes up the new regime are usually the shattered pieces of the old regime. I used to give this talk and lose everybody right at that very moment. But having now lived through Egypt the past couple of years, audiences have all of a sudden become more receptive to this question of what, if anything, replaces an authoritarian regime. So those are my two simple propositions. I believe in truth in packaging. And now I'm going to go through a little bit and see if I can illustrate those points. And then I'll leave the individual cases for the most part, for a discussion. So if you want, for example, to discuss the China regime today, the Saudi regime, the Iranian regime, the Russian regime in detail, I'm very happy to do that, those and others, the UAE, Singapore. But I'm going to speak a little bit more generally to try to get some general patterns established rather than the nitty-gritty of specific regimes, but I'm very eager to discuss whatever specific regimes might be on your mind.